Family, life is hard. Sometimes we carry stress, we carry anxieties that for some reason it's like we have it in a backpack. It's like, what in the world are we doing? Why are we carrying this? I know that's me. Managing Anxiety and Stress, this online course that's offered by Dr. Terry Lynn Kim through National Center CST.teachable.com. They will give you practical, evidence-based strategies for managing your anxiety and stress. We're just excited to be able to partner up with them. If you use our promo code GLO808, they'll give you 10% off whatever classes you sign up for. And I'll just say this, it's a great blueprint for your life. And it's nice to know that we have them in our corner. So if that's you and you have the heaviness of life in the form of stress or anxiety, go ahead and sign up for this course. We definitely would love to hear your success stories as you walk through this. Once again, the website is nationalcentercst.teachable.com. How's it, family? A few months ago, my wife and our kids, we were looking for a church to attend. I want to say it's back in, I can't remember what month it was. It was a few months ago. And we came upon this church called Calvary. And we've heard of Calvary, in Hawaii, Calvary Chapel. And we instantly fell in love with just the way that they held service. And we met this gentleman by the name of Rory, Rodgers. He's a lead pastor. And instantly we just felt drawn to not just him as a person, but the way that he carried himself, the way he led the body of Christ. And I don't know what it is, but we kind of just instantly felt a connection. And for those of you that have been following our journey as our family, we've been going through transition from, being in Hawaii to here in Oregon, having a ministry and a church that we were pastoring, and then just out of God's moving us in such an abrupt way because of my brother being sick, and we're here, and to walk in the doors of Calvary Chapel and meeting Pastor Rory, his beautiful wife, and his kids, and his team that he has. And I'm excited to announce that we finally have him today. We're going to be spending some time with him. He's a pastor, obviously, and there's something that my wife and I were talking about. His heart is so legit, for mentoring, pastoring, loving on people. He's very good at that. And I asked him to spend some time with us today. Part of it, I want to talk a little bit about Nepal. They just came back from Nepal, which I didn't know the actual, logistics of the country, but it's so powerful, the testimony and the stories. And I wanted to share some of that with you guys. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of other things. He's actually a jiu-jitsu practitioner. He's an amazing musician, worship leader. He's actually a very good comedian as well. But I will say we're just blessed to have him with us today. And I hope you guys can get a notepad and some pens handy, because I'm sure he's going to drop some gold nuggets of wisdom for you guys today. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Pastor Rory Rodgers. I'm always nervous every time I do this. I've been doing it so long. Do you still get nervous when you're, I know you've been doing pastoring and on stage for so long, but do you still get nervous?
It's not often. It just kind of depends the venue, and just, it depends. But, when you already know that you're a total screw up and,
no pressure.
You're an idiot and you're going to mess up, then just, I expect that it's going to happen, so it's going to be okay.
So for people that don't know, Rory asked me before we went live, are we brothers? I said, I don't know. I might be the shorter, fatter version and a darker version, but it's possible.
Other than that, the likeness is uncanny.
It's very much so. I'm 6'4" and a half, but thank you very much for your time. I got to ask, there's actually a whole bunch of questions, but the first one is your saddle actually 50 pounds? You said that, I think, on Sunday.
It's so funny. I was actually last night thinking about it. I was modifying a kid's saddle that was so light, and I was like, gosh, when I say my saddle's 50 pounds, and I was like, I don't know if I'm the best with numbers and figures, but, I would say it's probably, I mean, it could be, it could be in the 50 to 60 pound range, something like that.
And the horse is totally fine with that.
I mean, the saddle's the lightest thing that they're carrying. Then you throw me on there at probably 235, if I'm being nice to myself, and then you're running up mountains. And Wednesday, a couple days ago, we were moving bulls that wanted to go uphill and not downhill. And so I was chasing bulls uphill, trying to push them down. And we had to make multiple trips up a good size hill/mountain.
And they listened to you.
The horses or the bulls?
Bulls.
They were not listening. They were going they were being bullheaded. We literally, Joe and myself, were like, is this where the term bullheaded comes from? Because they were pushing against us and our dogs. And so we left a few up on the mountain because they were being stubborn. So
how heavy are the bulls? Just, I'm curious.
Oh, gosh.
2,000?
Again, real great at figures here, but they're probably, maybe 2,000 pounds, something like that, or 15. Yeah, probably in the 2,000 pound range, roughly.
There's a guy on YouTube I watch. He has these bulls. I forget what they're called. He has names for them. Rufus. And he would call Rufus to come and regulate when the other bulls aren't listening. And Rufus will come and...
That's genius. We need to get a Rufus.
Yeah.
It was bull number 107 was the one that was giving us problems. So 107 is going to be living on that mountain for a while. But yeah, it's basically numbers or the red one or the black one that gave you trouble, so.
So is that your daily rounding up bulls? Is that something you...
No, when you're talking just ranching, it's a seasonal thing that you've got to, the bulls have been off of the cattle for the season. And now that the cattle are being put out to pasture in the spring and they've got their little calves with them, now the bulls are ready to go be put back with the cows to make more babies. So this winter they've been in their own bull pasture and it's just a bunch of dudes hanging out.
So
they fight each other and they tear up fences, and they usually don't fight unless you're moving them together and you get them kind of together, and then you're going through gates, and then like we doctored them and gave them some medicine the other day. So you're moving them through tiny quarters, but if they start fighting each other, there's nothing you can do to take their tension off of fighting each other. So they'll tear up barns and corrals and gates and panels and everything. And so it's just, you got to be careful and wise and strategic, but it's just a seasonal thing. So they're going to be, right now they're with the moms, and they're making babies. And then come late summer, you take those bulls off, and then they go back to just being with the dudes, in their bachelor pad for the winter.
That sounds a lot like us when we get stressed out. We just start.
Yeah, I know, just like fighting each other. So there's so many seasonal things in the cowboy world and the ranching world. So right now it's branding season, and so just this week I was off branding 2 different times at ranches. So you're roping the calves and doctoring them. And
I'm totally naive. When branding is just to mark them.
Yeah.
Basically.
So, the branding itself is, but when you say branding, you're essentially giving those calves their first round of medicines and vitamins and respiratory aid. And then each ranch has to have its mark so that those calves can be kept track of. And then also, because a lot of times they'll get into other neighbors' pastures and they'll be like, oh, that's the neighbor's animal. But then when you go to sell them, they've got to have these markings that distinguish them as yours. And so you will brand them. And then like one ranch that I work for, they'll do an ear mark. And so it's like a little cut on the ear that's like a triangle, or it could be whatever you want it to be. Some ranches do like a little thing on the chin that's like a little turkey gobbler looking deal on the, I don't personally have never made those or seen that, and then you do all sorts of things like castration, and make those bulls into steers. All that happens in this period of branding. And so it's essentially getting them ready to be healthy.
So castration is when they cut
the testicles off. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So, some ranches will, right when the calf is born, they'll band them and put a little rubber band down there. And then that rubber band just takes out circulation, and then the little appendages drop off. And then some ranches, it's a common thing that you just pull them out, use what's called a masculator, and it crimps the blood flow and things like that. You do the surgery, you spray it with, like a numbing agent and a antibacterial spray. And then they just hop up and go head off to nurse their mom. And you would never know that they even had any major surgery done, or a first degree burn on the hide, all that. So, but when you, the studies that are done, or the, roping and the care that we do for them is, it's actually pretty low stress on them, especially if their moms are nearby, things like that. So it's kind of crazy. It's really like mass production of beef. We're doing, some of these ranches are 800 to 1,000 head just that we're working on. And, but that's really small compared to, Texas ranches and things like that.
That's still a lot.
Yeah.
When we first met you, I remember I just felt like led to just tell, hey, if you need help with anything. I'm thinking, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
That's a big job. That's a lot.
Yes. Yeah. So this week, it's all seasonal stuff. So I got back from Nepal mid-March, and what is it now, April 27th or something, and I've done 4 brandings and then a gathering of bulls and doctoring those bulls. And in that brandings, it's traditional that they serve a big meal afterwards, and I'm always looking for an opportunity to share the gospel with the ranchers that I'm with. Yeah. And just this week, we're done working, we're eating a delicious meal, and the Lord opened up an opportunity to share the gospel with probably 15 people that were eating lunch together. It just came up in conversation, and this particular group of guys, nobody loves Jesus or knows Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's why I do it. Number one is to get out to like an unreached people group that are the cattle ranchers in this area that live out in the desert, live out where no one's going out there. And a lot of times they don't go to church. They're not going to take the time to go do that because it's difficult to get your chores done, then travel to town. And so I go out there. It's kind of an itinerant circuit preacher type thing that I've got going on.
Well, you're doing what Jesus said, right? Go versus making them come.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So
a lot of going on.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I shared with you on Sunday. What is today? Or Wednesday, talking about one of our friends, when we started our church in Hawaii, one of the congregation, he came up and basically said, I think I shared with you, he said, never trust a pastor who doesn't work, have a job, or is afraid to do any type of manual labor. And when he said that, it really hit me kind of in a good way, but it also kind of like, what is he really saying? Mm-hmm. And when we met you, that's one of the things I saw. Wow, this guy works not just with his hands, but it's a weird combination. Somebody that works so hard and heavy with it, but they're very good with people in a pastoral role. Mm-hmm. You have a very heavy anointing in your life in an area of pastoral. I know there's a lot more things you do. And you said Nepal. I want to interject that. I know you're here in Oregon, but do you feel that you're completely back in Oregon, or are you still in Nepal? Is part of your heart, or do you still feel that you're in that time zone sometimes? Do you ever feel that way?
As far as time zone goes, I adjust pretty quickly being back now. I kind of have good patterns of traveling, and jet lag doesn't really hit me hard anymore, those sorts of things. And then like my first trip to Nepal was in 2015, and I had a hard time adjusting coming back. The cultural shock, just being over there, rocked me. And then the unreached aspect of them not having any evangelistic presence there, you know, in the Himalayas is where I'm speaking of, just rocked my world and made me really emotional. And kind of like when missionaries go and come back, it's difficult for them to adapt back. And I only went on a 2-week trip, but I came back just feeling like nobody knows what I saw over there.
But what I felt just from that video, if I got hit, and I'm an emotional guy anyway, but if I got hit that way, I can't even imagine spending 2 weeks or even being a missionary for extended.
Yeah.
That's why when I thought of that question, I'm like, I would still, it's kind of like a soldier that does I know you're not in military, but that's how I reference it. Like you just invested your life there and you have to come back home. And I know you have a family and a church and all that, but my heart will still be like, man, I hope they're okay.
Yeah. It's funny because literally, you know, probably an hour ago, I met with a girl from our church that feels called to go be a long-term missionary. And so I was getting her set up with, you know, what to prepare for, but also the importance of having a local church partner with you and send you out. And one reason is that they're continually in touch with you and with you in the race. And then when you come back, you have a good place to come back because you're going to be like a soldier who's come back from a combat tour and nobody understands what you've gone through and you just need support and care. But that's, you know, for 2-weeker trip, that's kind of pathetic, you know, that I was so shook by it. But, you know, I've gone 10 times or so now and come back and it's more just exciting because God is moving so powerfully. But my life is such a, it's on a yearly schedule where things are just on the calendar and you just knock them out. And before you know it, the year's over and the time travels so fast now for me. But, you know, I got back from, well, if I could belabor the point, you know, when New Year's rolls around, I'm usually kind of dreading New Year's because it means then I start training to go to Nepal. And so I have my team formed and then we have to start getting physically fit. We get weighted packs. We meet down regularly at the high school football stadium and we start tearing out stairs up and down, up and down, up and down. We start at 7 sets and then each week we go up a set. And so
up and down is 1 set.
So, yeah. And it's 4 sets of, so it'd be, I guess that'd be reps. So it'd be 7 reps of 4 sets of stairs. And so we start with 7, start easy. And then each week we up it. So by the time we leave for Nepal, we're at 12 and we're running, you know, we're able to run a bunch and then we do like fun games where someone gets to pick what we do up the set of stairs, like going backwards or sidestepping or running or just running on the actual seats. So it's like a double set or whatever, you know, all of that. But that's hard on the body, you know. And then we actually also we do like leapfrog going up. So we'll take a set and the first person in the front would maybe pray for our trip, and then the next person prays for the trip. And so it's very intentional prayer for the Nepal trip. All that to say, you got to work out. And then you go, and Nepal is a lot of traveling just to get there. And the Jeep rides up to the Himalayas and then the trekking. And then we get back from Nepal. And then the same week, branding season starts on my ranch ministry. And so, you know, we just got back and then the branding season starts.
And yesterday you did one, right?
Yeah. Yes. So this week I did 2 brandings, same ranch, but different locations. And then a different ranch had me help pull bulls off the mountain. And then doctor them, things like that. And then all the while, I had midweek Bible study that I had to study for. I made a giant pot of soup for our potluck that we do for our midweek study. I had to counsel 2 different families through difficult situations. It was, you know, a couple hours of counseling, prep for Sunday. You know, we have a foster son and we had to work through issues and just disciple him and encourage him. And you know, it's all really wonderful, you know.
I definitely want to come back to the foster because that's something dear to our heart. But I got to ask this question is, out of all the nations and all the regions, why Nepal?
We had been fasting and praying in 2014 for God to do a missions movement or just a work for missions in our church. I was from a very mission-minded church, and when I came here, there were individuals at our church in Prineville that, they would come to me and be like, hey, just so you know, I'm going to Uganda tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, you're just like going? Like the church isn't going to like pray over you, or like, you don't want us to be a part of that? And but other than that, we had kind of this small town feel of people with their world, their sports, their property, and they didn't want to hear about the nations. And so we'd been fasting and praying that God would open up our church's eyes to see the need for the gospel to get to what I thought at the time was just people out there that needed to hear about Jesus. But as we fasted and prayed, the Lord led us to go to what was called a radical intensive that David Platt was putting on. And our church had gone through Radical that David Platt wrote, and Follow Me that he had written. And we'd use those as discipleship tools. And so we had appreciated his encouragement to us. And he was putting on this missions conference, and you had to apply to go to it. And they were only accepting 100 pastors. And so you apply and you kind of speak towards your missions culture as a church. And we were like, we don't really have one much, and we were accepted to go to it. So we flew out there. It was in Birmingham, myself and one other elder. And this elder said, hey, my mom, she happens to be a Uganda missionary. And she said, you got to listen to this message that David Platt just did. It was called The Gospel. I think it was called The Gospel in Nepal. And out of all the missions work that David Platt had done, this one had really rocked him. He had been flown up into the Himalaya mountains and trekked through the mountains with an organization that specialized on 5 main points of humanitarian aid. And but he just noticed that there was a huge presence of darkness and demonic forces in the Himalayas, as these unreached people groups have had no gospel presence there in 2,000 years. And so this was all just a message that this Uganda missionary had heard. And he said, hey, my mom just heard this. David Platt went to Nepal. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I don't even know where Nepal is, but we went to this conference and we sat at this table kind of in the orientation of this conference. And we're introducing ourselves to the people around our table, and a couple guys from Georgia, this, that. And this guy sitting next to me goes, I'm from Nepal, from an organization in Nepal. And I go, oh, that's so crazy. We were just talking about this trip that David took to Nepal. And, what are the odds, and he goes, yeah, that was actually my organization that he helicoptered up in the mountains with, and then did like a 2-week trek out. And I was like, well, what are the odds of that? And this guy, he reminded me of like a Navy SEAL who had been on the battlefield and had seen things. And he was a little bit reserved, just like a combat veteran is, they're not exactly telling you all the things that they've done. But we happened to sit by him over the course of 3 days. And I just kept I actually am a military history buff. And I like to talk to veterans, but I like to like gently pull out things. And I just did the same tact with him. And he said, you know what? It's funny, during the conference, we had to take like a quiz on our missions culture in our church, and we got like a D-, and he was just laughing. Like, he's like, oh man, he's like, I've been there. And he just said, I feel like God has knit my heart with you. And if you'd like, I'd love to just be a part of helping you guys in your church. And so we had arranged for him to come to Prineville, and he's visited us twice, and for us to go to Nepal. And so that began what really, to me, I like to call it like a Book of Acts style open door, which oftentimes with fasting and prayer, the Lord does that. Somebody, I think it was Andrew Murray or somebody said, when I pray, coincidences happen, Yeah. And so for 10 years, we've been working with reaching the unreached people of the Himalaya mountains. And it was all through kind of this door, through this missions conference, and then with this friend. And since then, his organization has come under some persecution and some, the flags and all that. So they had to leave. And so we're not with them anymore in country, but we're still going. And so that's how Nepal. I didn't even know where it was on the map when I'd heard about it.
I didn't know until recently that it was not a part of India. I thought it was like the elite India.
Right.
People.
Yeah.
That's what I literally
sure.
thought. because they're always up high.
Yeah. Right.
I think that's when you were talking, I was just thinking this image of those buster missiles that the military used in Afghanistan, where they would shoot those missiles and they go in and then detonate.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what you guys did.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I think there's a mighty move of God in that region, but also the enemy's like, hey, wait a minute, this is ours, or they think. And I think that's powerful what you guys are doing.
Yeah. The kind of the work that the Lord's doing there through missionaries, and then even the Chinese Christians, they believe that the Himalaya mountains are like a dam, that when the Lord breaks through the Himalayas, it's really that movement back to Jerusalem. And if I was prepared, Brother Yun, I was trying to remember his name. Brother Yun, actually, God opened a door through visions and audible voices with my friend who was in Nepal, that a wise man was going to take him to Jerusalem. And he didn't. He's like, what in the world is that? A wise man is supposed to take me to Jerusalem. And he ended up being in China, and a guy comes in out of a warehouse and says, hey, I'm a wise man and you're supposed to help me get to Jerusalem. And it was Brother Yun from the Heavenly Man book. And so kind of this movement of missionary work in Asia realizes that the Silk Road that went from Jerusalem and through the Himalayas, that used to be a road that the gospel was taken on, and it's since been stopped. And so the gospel presence has not been there. And that if they could get the gospel to penetrate the Himalaya mountains, it would be like a kind of an ushering into the end, where Jesus says that all the nations, and we understand that to mean tribes, tongues, and peoples, that they'll hear the gospel as a testimony of him, and then the end will come. And so in a way, it's not always the focus that I remember as I'm doing these things, but it was a very foundational thing of eschatology, of like, we're helping be a part of the kingdom of God coming by being evangelists and working through that Olivet discourse passage.
It's a very victorious eschatology for me when what you guys are doing. But I was thinking of there has to be remnants there, people that have been persevering, but yet they don't have the team or their support. And I feel like there's some guys that are in a mountain, kind of like Elisha, he's hiding, and God displays his, when he rushes up against the mountain, right? And the mighty rushing wind. And
yeah, I'm sure that there are. I think what's really incredible is there's a number, if you were to read the book, Eternity in Their Hearts, by Donald Miller, I think, it's all about how God has moved in peoples and tribes and places just to prepare them to hear the gospel before any missionaries have gotten there. And our testimony is that where we've gone, I've actually met people who were having visions and would fall into trances that were Buddhist, Tibetan. Their dad was the Lama of the region, being raised. This 12-year-old boy was being raised to be the next Lama. This is one story out of many, that was watching his yak along the hillside and fell into a trance, and was in a trance for 12 days where dark figures were ushering him through these different lands to Buddha. And Buddha would tell him, for the next 12 days, I'm going to show you the better God to worship. And finally it was to the Lord Buddha, and he said, okay, now stop worshiping me. You need to worship Yesu, because he's God. And so this individual and some Western men are going to come along, and they're going to help you know Yesu and how to be forgiven of your sins and how to have a relationship with your Creator. And he wakes up, and some time goes by, and my friend gets lost in the Himalayas and goes the wrong direction and runs into this guy. And And this guy says, I knew you were coming. You're supposed to tell me how to know my creator and how to be forgiven of the bad things I've done. And now that individual is a pastor up there in the mountains. And so whether it's the pockets of people that you're referencing that maybe at one point 2,000 years ago, somehow, it's interesting. They have cell phones. Yeah. There's actually better cell coverage where we go than I get some of these places in Central Oregon. But I think there's restriction on information and content that comes through. But there's, so I don't know about the pockets. I haven't met the pockets, but I have met many miraculous pre-conversion stories where God still requires the missionaries to go and to share the gospel. That's how he's designed it. But he's also been preparing their hearts like a Cornelius, to hear that gospel.
So they're hungry. Would you say that they're hungry, or?
Well, they're very sweet. There are many sweet Nepalis. They are hungry for a miracle in their life. Yeah. And, it's crazy because they know the spiritual world exists. Mm-hmm. They see demons. It's a regular thing in Nepal for them to encounter demons. And so, in fact, Buddhism is very aware of the demonic world and the demigods. And in fact, a head demon controls all the reincarnation levels and all of that. When you go into the monasteries, there are special boxes that look like a good box kite that we might have. And they're traps to trap demons. And the Buddhists will hope that they can get that demon to come onto them and maybe beat the other demon that's been tormenting them. And so, many of them will hear about Jesus, who has power over demons and can bring freedom. And they're hungry for that. They want that freedom. Or they're, because of the medical stuff is not good over there, they're hurting. We've had a blind person be healed, where we're at. We've had a lame person with like I want to say cerebral palsy or something like that, be healed as well. So the Lord has worked miracles as we've gone. And so they're excited for like the miracle and the deliverance from the demons, but to make that choice to make Jesus your Lord and then transfer away from what is a culture saturated in Buddhism, I'm sympathetic to that. I understand that, as we might minister to Mormons in the United States that were raised in that, to say, Mom and Dad, I'm leaving the family religion. That's hard. I preach that to them, that I'm praying for them, and God will give you the strength to do that when it's time to do that. But they're hungry for deliverance and freedom. It's the difficulty is the surrender,
the culture.
Yeah.
I think we relate to that because being from Hawaii, our culture is so important to a lot of people. One of the things we're very, I think, adamant about is it's important to know where you came from, but it's really the kingdom culture that has to supersede Native Hawaiian, Chinese, Filipino, or Nepali.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is his culture, right? That's tough because it's not just one person. We're talking about, like you said, it's generational. To have them denounce, hey, Dad, I'm going to denounce all of our history because I'm a Christian. No, it's like that's a different dynamic. Mm-hmm. I think I can see the demonic presence in that area just because of that alone.
Yeah.
They've had free reign for how many years?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember my first trip riding a Jeep through some mountains and seeing a nice mountain pond with, if you've all seen the red, white, yellow, and blue flags that flutter, in even around the States, people will wave them as like trying to be spiritual and kind of tap into their Buddhist, what they want to be. They want to be some kind of Buddhist. So they'll flutter these flags that have Tibetan or Nepali prayers on them, Buddhist prayers. And as those flags flutter, they release karma, right? Well, this mountain pond had just flags just draped around, it looked like a used car lot, around this, but it's a nice little pond though. And I told our guide, like, oh, that looks like a nice little place to have a picnic. And he goes, you don't want to eat there. He says the high places and the mountain lakes are where demons are worshipped. And then he told me this story that I ended up going to this place about 2 years later of there was an older man whose parents were the first believers in a district in Nepal. They were told by the monks that they needed to renounce Jesus. They wouldn't, so they were killed. So first believers and the first martyrs. And then they had a son who at this point was an old man when I met him. This old man led the village witch doctor to Jesus, and they didn't have a Bible, and the witch doctor didn't know how to read, but they fasted and prayed, and they had a Bible, like they stumbled upon a Bible, and he had a miraculous ability to read. So they're reading and they're learning about the kingdom of God, and about 1,000 feet above their village is this massive lake they literally call Demon Lake. And every year there's a festival where all the villages come around to worship this demon that will manifest itself. And it had an appearance of like a duck. And we joke about that in Oregon because of the Oregon Ducks. I was a Beaver fan, so, our rivals were the Ducks. I was like, Ducks are demonic, but not, just a little joke.
Just kidding.
Yeah, just kidding, guys. No, now they're in a different league, and I'm actually a Duck fan, so that works. But anyways, one day the now saved witch doctor and the old man went up to the village during festival day, and they confronted the demon, and there were many other demons that were showing themselves. And they just said, you're not welcome here anymore. In the name of Jesus, you have to leave. We're claiming this area for Christ. And the demon left. And all of the villagers knew that it was Jesus that brought the freedom from that. So
that's powerful.
Yeah. But that's a common thing there in Nepal. And when you're there, if you have any discernment whatsoever, you'll be totally fine, and you'll go in this one area and you feel like you got punched in the stomach. And we have had the organization we've gone with, we've had their photographer faint, who is in really good shape when we were heading up to Demon Lake to do like some intercessory prayer over the area and kind of refortify the deliverance of the area. Our photographer fainted and passed out as she leaned against a Buddhist stupa. And then our guide, who's a good friend of mine, in incredible physical shape, passed out right in front of us and hit his head on a table. And he's like, I've never had this happen to me. Like I just sense that we're going into kind of like the battlefield. And so,
well, main thing, nobody got beat up and the clothes taken off.
That only happened twice. No, just kidding. Yeah, everyone remained fully clothed. Okay. So, yeah.
For people that don't know, there's a scripture reference in the where these guys got
the 7 sons of Sceva.
Yeah. Well, I will say that. So your next team goes up. Is it this year or next year?
Typically, March is the time frame that we go. We've been trying to do 2 trips a year and do one in the winter. That's a little more discipleship of people that do know Jesus. And we did one of those trips, and we were trying to teach them the Bible because they don't have a good understanding of the Bible, even the churches that are there. Christianity's only been in Nepal since the 50s. And so there's just not a lot of presence of good discipleship and Bible knowledge. And so we went through the Bible Project's great animated series with some Nepalis.
Cartoon one.
Yeah, we just did the Pentateuch, and the Bible Project had those in Nepali dialect. And so we took them, and everybody got a big poster of like Genesis and the timeline and the comic strip that they have all the way through Deuteronomy. And we discipled them through that. But it's been difficult to do those journeys twice a year. So it's once a year for us. Yeah.
I know my wife, we're talking about maybe getting in shape,
All right.
So I went up to the Butte, the
Barnes Butte. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm good. That's your backyard, right?
Yeah. Our back view is of Barnes Butte. Yeah. It's funny because when I was in high school, I went on a youth group backpacking trip, and I had no idea anything about backpacking or hiking. And so borrowed my buddy's trekking pack, and I packed it with every single thing I thought that I would need on this camping trip, including like a tent, and all that. So heavy. And I probably made it a quarter of a mile before I was like dying, didn't pack enough water. We didn't have water for like this, 5-day trip. And God actually miraculously led us to a spring. Anyways, but it was not like a fond memory that I had of this horrible hiking trip. And then I did it again a couple of years later. Horrible experience as well. And we were like snowed in. And that was my experience with actually backpacking and trekking. I'm a hunter, and so I've done hunting and things, but like it's not something I particularly enjoy in my flesh, was the hiking in that aspect. But that's what's the incredible thing is when I realized that there's there's half the world that's unreached with the gospel. So they have 2% or less of a discipleship making culture. And then a quarter of the world, so half the half, is what's called unengaged, unreached, which means in 2,000 years, nobody has gone to these peoples and tribes and tongues and told them the gospel and then attempted to disciple them to make disciples. And so when God opened Nepal for me and then showed me the deep need among the Tibetans, he also put in me like the discipline to do these trainings and the hikings and all that, where in my flesh, it's not something that I'm like, this is totally what I want to be doing,
Why are the numbers so low? Like, what changed? Why? Like, that's crazy. We have mega churches all over the place. But I don't.
Yeah.
If that's a real number, why is that?
I mean, I'm not like necessarily trying to be critical of big churches, but like,
well, even small
Jesus
churches.
didn't really. Yeah, it's like if we would have put half the energy into reaching the nations as we have into just building our mega structures, and all of that, we would have reached the nations by now, but it's just kind of a thought. But specifically these areas where it's unreached or unreached, they are in really difficult geographic locations. So the Himalayas, for instance, very difficult to get up in there. But then you couple it with any type of government problems, and restrictions, things like that. That makes it difficult. The Himalayas are interesting because they're so high and the elevation can make you sick. And a friend of mine once said, they must call it Nepal because there's been no Paul, like Paul was like, I'm going to leave this to the next generation to hit this mountain up, although he did plenty of trekking, and plenty of traveling. But when you go into the Himalayas, you'll go like 2 miles and go around a corner, and it's a completely different tribe with a different language, and it's a different people group. In fact, one village that we go to, which actually has a Calvary Chapel in it, through this village of 200 homes, there's a line, and on one side is one tribe, and on the other side is another tribe. So there's 2 different languages there. Where we go currently on our trips, we have to have 2 translators to share the gospel with people, from the Nepali tongue into the Tibetan tongue and back. So I've been to Hungary on mission trips, and I've had Hungarian translators. I've gone to Brazil a few times. You got your Portuguese translators, and then and now it's just really interesting to be sharing the gospel. Then the Nepali says it, then the Tibetan says it. But what's great?
Back to you.
And then it comes back to me, which the wonderful thing is, if you've ever spoken through a translator, is it gives you time to think about what you're going to say next. And I'm very animated, and I use a lot of like actions and being funny and crowd participation of like messing with people while I'm talking. And it just gives me time to think about how I can illustrate this principle in a funny way or in an engaging way. So it's kind of nice. You get a little like at least 30-second break between each phrase, to decide what you're going to say next.
Do you ever mess with them by doing a certain visual within each context and they get it
Yes.
wrong,
Yeah. So I've been praying because knowing that we're going up in there's a lot of idolatry. I mean, Hinduism is 200 million gods, and then and Buddhism is built off of Hinduism. And, we're going up into this valley, and it's people that have never heard of Jesus. And I'm just thinking like, man, at some point I'm going to have to like call them to repent of idol worship. We do a lot of mime-based dramas that come from YWAM, and I've been doing them since I'm 15 years old, and they're really powerful. Even now I see them done, sharing the gospel, and they bring me to tears all 30 years later.
It's powerful because I watched a few because there's no words in some of them, or
no words.
They're
Yeah,
all just music, right?
Yeah.
That's
music and sound effects. Yeah.
That's perfect for what you guys do.
Yeah. Because I've done them in Hungary. I've done them in Brazil. I've done them in different places in Nepal. And you don't need words. And then I'll explain it through a translator. But the people are locked on. And up there, they don't have a whole lot of like theater or dramas or, so they're like, these people are famous, and we're doing these silly like dramas where we're like, they're like stuck. Yeah, we have like masks that we're hiding behind. It's a whole thing. But my point is that I was sharing the gospel and I was trying, like, Lord, help me to know when it's time to be like Paul in Athens, who said, I perceive that you're very religious, but I'm going to point you to this God here. Or, in Lystra or in Derby, when Paul, just had to be like, no, like, stop worshiping these dumb idols, But I knew that the moment you confront that, like, that could be the danger zone. That's that dividing line where it's like, okay, we've gone from, we're just reaching and trying to show the love of Jesus to now, like, we got to say something that may get us booted out of here. And so I was really just praying about, is that even this trip, or is that even our responsibility? And maybe it's the Nepali that lives in the area that we're helping. Maybe we'll leave that up to him. But as I was preaching one day, just a month ago, I was having the translators work, and the Lord led me to pick up a couple of sawn logs, probably 1.5 feet tall, that people were sitting on them, kind of as little chairs. And he had me set one on top of another. And so I pretended to chop down a tree and like chop, 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 and then this log falls over, and then you have two translators going chirp, 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 and chirp, chirp, chirp. It's everyone. So then the Nepalis are just like laughing because like,
well, you guys 3 times.
Yeah. And then and that's part of the fun. Is how are they going to translate my cartoon? Hungarians called me Cartoon Rory when I used to go and do missions in Hungary. And anyways, I get my pocket knife out and I pretend to whittle a face on this log. And I tell them, boy, I went and it's the Isaiah passage, I went and chopped this thing down, and I used part of it to build a house and part of it to bake my bread. And then part of it I whittle and I make myself a figure that I'm praying and I'm paying homage to and I'm worshiping. And, and they're just like, all the Nepalis are just like, oh yeah. And I'm like, eyes it has, but it does not see, and ears it has, but it does not hear. And then as I'm telling them all this, I like turned real fast and I bumped it with my rear end and knocked it over. I'm like, oh no, and they're all like, tee, and I go, oh no. And then I like pick it up and set it back up. And I'm like, I made it. I whittled it. I'm praying to it. I knocked it over, and it needs my help to get back up, and I'm like, you guys, like, I'm kind of like, remind you of anything, because part of our drama I was getting at was, there's a mime type creator that's creating the world and putting the stars in the place and fashions man. And so they kind of have known through the drama that there's a creator. And I tell them, like, he created all these mountains and he created the birds and the yaks, and all those things. And so, to just kind of fall back on, you got to kind of bring the confrontation, because that's what the gospel does. But kind of do it in a way that's tactful, that will, and praise God, that they love us and they want us back. And
they trust you enough to bring that.
Yeah.
If you have to.
Yes.
Or if God tells, hey, now is the time to.
Yes.
Drop that conviction nugget.
Yeah. And we had, this was our 3rd time in this particular area. And last year we were very bold to be sharing the gospel. We went way up high to this village that we were told, might not want to go today. It's festival day for the Buddhists. So they'll be all at the monastery, and they'll have been drinking. So it's maybe not the best place to go. And we're like, we didn't come all the way here to not go tell people about Jesus. So we went up there and we just turned on dance music on this portable Bose speaker that we have. And we just start dancing, and people are like, it's like going back hundreds of years where they don't have modern things at all. So when there's a dance party going on, they're like, this is the best, And so people started coming, and they started leaving the monastery and coming down to us. And I'll never forget the monks looking at us like, what is going on, And we did our drama, and we shared the gospel and all the different tools that we had. And but then we got word that like, oh, you guys kind of made some ripples up here that and kind of made the local pastor uncomfortable because we're being super bold. And he's like, and this is a true thing you got to be careful of, is like, he's got to live there. We just go in there and
stir everything up.
Yeah. And so he kind of threw us under the bus, like it was their fault. And I was like, good, man, it's totally fine. But then we said, well, is there anything we can do to kind of smooth out ripples? And the government told us, or some officials told us, well, there's 200 homes up in this area, and many people don't have blankets. I suppose you could buy a blanket for every family here. And I'm thinking like, those nice felt blankets that there are at Costco or something. And, when it wears out a little bit, you give it to the dog to sleep on, and it's just a light thing. And it's probably, $2.50 or $3, and you can get everybody in. And they're like, no, like there's like a cultural Nepali blanket that's 1 inch thick and it's about 8 feet long, and they're about $30 a piece. And so I'm just
200.
Yeah. And so, it would end up being $6,000 for the blankets, and then about $4,000 in porter costs to get these blankets up the mountain. And I was like, well, the Lord, it's a whole nother story. But the minute we started doing missions to the unreached, our church went from being always ready to cut my salary to having plenty of money to be sending missionaries and paying at least half a missionary's costs and all sorts of things. So money hasn't been an option since we've been going, or an option. Money hasn't been a problem. An issue, yeah, since we've been going to the unreached. Anyways, that day when we were like, well, we'll just see how the Lord provides for these blankets if we're supposed to do it. And we think he opened up this area for us. So we'll just trust the Lord. That day I get a call from a man in our body that said, I just feel like God wants me to donate $10,000 to Nepal. And I said, that's the exact number that we need to get these blankets. And so we ended up having those blankets ported up to the villages waiting for us when we got there this year. And the whole area was so excited that we were coming because they'd known us, and then so excited to get a blanket. And it was like a massive, Christmas morning, all of these people coming, and we got to give them treats and, food and beverages, and we just blessed them, and then got to do our dramas and share with them, and then distribute these blankets. And each blanket came in these red bags that were super easy to spot. And so after the outreach was over, and it was one of those moments where our heart was theirs and their heart was ours. And later on, the Nepali friend of ours said, they've been telling us how much they love you. And but you could see way up on a mountain these red bags going up to these little huts, and going around the corner for a couple hours after the outreach was over. You'd see these red dots going up the mountain, so just an incredible way to ornament the gospel through.
So how do you say hi to someone in Nepal? Do you guys hug forehead to forehead?
Ooh, that's a good, I'll try that one. So, the Nepali word for hi is namaste.
Namaste.
But that means the gods within you I greet. And so in like the 50s, when the gospel came to Nepal, they wanted to have another way to say hello. So they made up a word. It's the word, what was the word you were telling me in Hawaiian that means like everything's going crazy today?
Oh, hamajang.
Yeah. Hamajang. I was like, I got to remember that. I got to start saying hamajang. But they made up a word that is jamasi. Yeah. And so in Nepal, and you can still say namaste. It's not like, how dare you? It's like, it's still customary to just be like, because a non-believer, if you're like jamasi, they're like, why not just say ooga booga dooga? So it's just not a word to them. But if someone says jamasi to you, they're a Christian. They know they're a Christian. It's kind of like the Christian fish of the Roman world of like, you draw that half of the fish.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'll draw the other half of the fish. It's like saying jamasi. So you would kind of put your hands like this and be like, namaste, or jamasi, or when you get up higher, there's a moment when you're climbing up the valley and up in the mountains where you notice the dress is a little different. The appearance of the individual is a little different. You can tell they're Tibetan, and you would say, Tashi Dele. And that's just kind of
Tashi
delay is like the greeting of the Tibetans, So, and then for the Christians, like that's a very warm and affectionate culture. So the hugs are good.
Hugs are good.
Yeah. No matter who it is, just hug them. And
I keep thinking of that movie, Golden Child. You ever seen that movie?
I don't think so. Huh?
Eddie Murphy, he goes up in the Himalayas.
Oh yeah, okay. I do remember like a preview or something. I gotta watch that.
I want the knife. Yeah.
Okay, now I gotta watch it.
Sorry, I chase squirrels a lot.
Hey, you know me. You've sat through my sermons.
Oh yeah. You know what? Speaking of your sermons, are you? You don't have to give away the trade secrets, of course, but are you? So when my dad was pastoring, he would write out every single thing he said, and for a minute it kind of bothered me. I'm like, Dad, like I don't feel like that's authentic, but that's how he did it. He would spend the whole week, whole month really hear from the Lord and writing it out. And so I wow, hey, that's and then for me, I'll have bullet points and I'll just like from the hip.
You're right. Yeah.
And sometimes I'll miss a lot, and so I know I got to work on those things just in preparation. And are you someone that's fully? Do you have a middle ground? How do you deliver your sermons? I want to ask you that.
Yeah. So I just remember being in a really homegrown school of ministry that I went to and being discipled in homiletics. And Greg Laurie, the famous evangelist. He's a cartoonist, and he, I was told, would do cartoons as his notes, and that would help him like keep track of where he's going because of these little figures that he drew. Alistair Begg, who I have met and got to have dinner with him, but I consider him like a father of my faith, and just listened to almost every one of his sermons and transcribed it, for myself. He encourages that for the first probably 10 years of ministry, you write out your sermons word by word. And one of his reasons is that he's like, if you waste one person's time for 1 minute, multiply that by however many people that are sitting out there, and you may have just wasted 200 minutes of whatever. That's his style. Of course, he's a little more like formal than I am. My style is probably outline format with bullet points, just because they're easier to follow than paragraphs. And then I read a lot. Alistair would say, and this is how I do my sermon prep. He said, write yourself clear. And so that's my first part. And so I'll go through the text and I'll do like an inductive Bible study of the text that I'm teaching on. I'll write down every thought that's kind of in my head, any funny song I know, poem, joke, all that stuff. And I'll check all my cross references, do my word studies, all that kind of stuff. And so I write myself clear. And that usually is, that's probably a 5-hour process or something like that for a sermon. And then he says, read yourself full. So then I read as much as I can. And it used to be that also I wasn't much of a reader, and I'd listen to as many sermons as I could, but I would just read. And so typically that's 3 commentaries. So it's not the full, it's just the chapter that we're on or whatnot.
Do you read out loud, or you just
in my head? I read it. Although if I can, if there's an audio book for it, maybe while I'm making my soup for church, I'll have like James Montgomery Boyce on Audible, and then I've got it on my Kindle. I use Kindle a lot, and so I'll be cooking soup for our midweek studies, and then I'll go highlight on my Kindle what I just heard, and then it's there for me to throw into my notes later on. So, and so the whole read yourself full thing, one of my last things I do it's a Sunday morning thing that I do. So head down to my office about 6 a.m. in my house, and I start pulling over all my highlighted points into my notes from all the books. And so nice thing is it automatically adds your references and your bibliography and all that kind of stuff. And so I have a lot of other guys' material. You probably noticed that I quote a lot of guys, and I made the joke.
A lot of boys.
Yeah. It just depends on what it is. Like, I found that James Montgomery Boyce has a really good Genesis commentary. So been using him a lot, but it's all over the place. But I really appreciate those guys. And I always say the joke of like, at the risk of not having an original thought in my head, I have
that,
another quote. Yeah, just the other day. But it's just like I like to bring the nuggets that I've found and give them to the people that are never going to read these books, And so what I found that just impact me, I want to bring out. And so I know that it can be overdone, and a lot of people are critical of that, and they're just kind of like, oh, you have 2 quotes at the max. And I'm like, man, I love these nuggets, and I just want to give them, So I'm sure it's just a style thing.
There's the great Tommy Lee. I don't know if you ever see this. A friend of ours in Hawaii, very successful businessman and great public speaker. He always opens up with, "Don't let the messenger get in the way of the message." And I think if we reference Sproul, is it Sproul? Is that how you say it? And if I like D.L. Moody, I read a few of his things too. Like that just solidifies. So there's no debate that what we're bringing it's just not just me.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just me. It's like, no, there's other people that actually are smarter than me.
Yeah. And, I just was taught that everything that I've learned from somebody else who learned from somebody else as well, and, I just appreciate those good minds, and then it can come out authentically in just regular one-on-one conversation, kind of like this, where it's not so much quote format or something. And then just the final thing that Alistair Begg says is pray yourself keen. And
pray yourself keen.
Yeah. And so that's just like an awareness of what God's doing in your church right now, who's going to be there, how that text can be applicable and be pressed into the hearts of the people, and just being aware of what's going on. And so that kind of happens from beginning to end of it all. But and then as far as I think there's a question within the question that was essentially as far as humor goes or whatnot.
Yeah.
I do appreciate kind of finding some good jokes, opening jokes, and so I'll just type in like joke about, child sacrifice. I'm just joking. But that was, Abraham sacrificed Isaac the other day. And so
what's his name? Oh my gosh, a big church in Texas. What's his name? The biggest church in Texas.
Would it be like Joel Osteen or you?
He always starts with a joke.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's so corny.
Yeah.
But I know he's going to do it every time.
Yeah. And so sometimes I do. There's a Calvary Chapel pastor in Stone Mountain, Georgia, named Sandy Adams. Mountain. Yeah, he's kind of a mentor of mine. But I heard him speak when I was 19, and he's hilarious. And so I gleaned a little from him. But the best stuff is typically the off the cuff story. And you were mentioning in my intro, kind of like bit of a comedian, and I've actually considered doing like some stand-ups type stuff.
You could pass for Michael Knowles. I've said that.
Oh yeah. Oh man, what a compliment. He's got way more inside in between his ears than I do.
I love his podcast. I love it.
I do too. Yeah, regularly.
I think he's a believer, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's a Catholic, but I'd say he's a Christian, born again Catholic. In my understanding.
Explain that. Born again Catholic. How would you describe that?
Yeah. Well, I would say like the some of the traditional Catholicism that maybe rests more on works-based righteousness, getting away from the scripture as being the only authority for faith, for righteousness, and then for practice in life. Whereas, probably your mainline Catholics are the Pope is the main authority. No matter kind of what he says, it goes, even if it's contradictory. The magisterium being the next big authority, and then which is the body of traditions of the writings, and then scripture is kind of like not as much the big authority, And so where a lot of righteousness may come through the various acts of you're giving and you're donating and you're, Hail Marys and all those sorts of things, praying to the saints and all that. When I listen to Michael Knowles speak, maybe even Matt Walsh, some of those guys may be debated on their tact on sharing difficult information with people,
They like starting fires.
Yes, I know, totally, which I am so non-confrontational, that's, but Michael Knowles, for instance, I believe rests in the finished work of Jesus at the cross, not on his own righteousness, not on, any of his alms that he's given or anything like that. Like he believes in atonement of the blood of Jesus for sins.
There is a stirring going on in that space.
Yeah.
People that are in the public spotlight.
Yeah.
There's something that God's doing with them.
Yeah.
You know, you see it, right? With their Candace Owens, Knowles, Walsh, the guy in the UK, what is his name? Russell Brand.
Yeah.
Something radical. And whether they're on point scripture or not, that desire to serve Jesus. And you say that, I want to compliment you on that, because not a lot of people that are quote unquote Christians will throw the name of Jesus out there a lot. And I think that's really important. And I think Russell Brand says that a lot now. Even though he started with the rosary, but he says it's about having a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah. Right.
A lot of people believe in God.
Yeah.
Or small letter God.
Yeah.
Gods.
Yeah.
Or co-create. No, there's not. Co-create. There's
right.
one.
Yes.
It's one.
Yeah. Usually you drop the Jesus name, and then there's going to be that's the conflict.
I've successfully triggered a few people, but you said Hail Mary. I wanted to go back to the Hail Mary. You said Hail Mary with the. I looked it up the other day, and it's like, you can't make this up. Like Hail Mary, my wife laughed because I knew what it was in football. It's like your last chance. That's it. And you got to go, just throw it and just hope that you get the touchdown.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I don't know if it's just because now that I'm getting a little older, I'm 43. And so I was pretty critical towards Catholics when I was a little younger. And I definitely think there's some theological differences, that there was a reason there was the Reformation and some very necessary things. The same could be said about anyone that goes to a Calvary Chapel that rests on any works of their flesh rather than on the finished work of Jesus at the cross. So the Lord just, the Lord just like, slow your roll a little bit, Rory. And, but often I'll make some Catholics mad, and I'll talk about the Mass and what that represents and the transubstantiation and those sorts of things, but the whole Hail Mary thing, it's interesting because when you read the account of Mary being pregnant with Jesus, there's some really neat psalms that are written in the Gospels, and songs, and people will rise up forever and call me blessed. And I just taught that, I think, at Christmas time as our Christmas message. And I was like, man, I've been kind of hard on just as far as valuing Mary. The Bible says that we're going to value Mary for all, and so it's like, don't worship her. She's not a co-redemptress to Jesus. She's not God herself. She was a woman. She was fallible. She had babies later on in life, after that, all that stuff. But wow, can you imagine, being chosen out of all the people in history to be the mother of God incarnate? Probably shouldn't be so critical of just things that value her, you know what I mean? So anyways, but interesting. The Hail Mary pass, that's the last thing I got, it's like,
let's go for it. I will say, when you talk about Calvary Chapel, and I saw it in a video that you sent me yesterday, how God stirred up these men in the church. And the question I had earlier was, in where we're from in Hawaii, and I'm not being critical of any people or communities, but they have everything they need. Got the job, like here, you got the ranch, you got the acreage, and it's like, I don't really have to go to church, because I've got it. My family's doing good. I got the college fund. We're going to go to Disneyland for 2 weeks every year. Got my retirement set up. My kids have the college fund. When I saw that video you shared about when you guys prayed and fasted, and it's just like that, now your focus and your vision is not just in this town. I think that's something that it has to be credited. I mean, it's so powerful that this town is 12,000 people. I might be more. I don't know.
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
For God to use a tiny little church, not tiny, but in reference to the state, but it's in the center. We're in Central Oregon. And I think that's really cool that we're in the center of the state, and you're sending people from this tiny little town.
Yeah. It's interesting. About 30 minutes away is a little tiny town with a general store called Post. And it's called Post because it's the marker where it's the middle of Oregon. So we're really easy to find on the map. But when God did do a work in our church, the friend of mine that I met at the missions conference, who got us connected in Nepal and everything. He said, he was from Arizona and Texas, and he said, I go to mega churches with like 30,000 people and try to tell them God's heart for the nations, and they just throw me out of the church. They throw me out of the room. And he said, you're, in this tiny little town in a tiny church. We've grown since then, but we're still tiny. And he said, you're doing things that other churches are hearing about in your vision for how to reach and how to be generous givers, that don't just make missionaries that are going out pay for their own trip, but we're paying for half of people's trip so that everybody in the church is a missionary and they're either praying, giving, or going. And he just said, just commended us. And of course, it's the glory is to the Lord. Cause we have a joke that we're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like at any moment, I don't know what I'm doing. I just feel like I'm reading the word and the Holy Spirit's moving. And besides praying and fasting about stuff, like I just try to run at whatever vision that I have and just go be bold and do it. And so God has reached from this tiny little town.
For point of reference for people that are listening, we say tiny little church, but they're packed every Sunday, 2 services. And sometimes I'm stressing at I say, hurry up, let's go. I don't want to sit in the back.
Yeah.
I don't want to be sitting in the lobby drinking my coffee. Because we don't want to interrupt people in the middle of worship or whatever. But yeah, I say small little church, but really you guys are doing amazing, like just full, I would say 80, 90% full, maybe 100% on a lot of days and 2 services. And when I led worship that one Sunday, I ain't gonna lie, Rory, I was like, oh my God, we gotta get up at 7.
Yeah, right.
Or 6:30.
Yeah.
I get up at 6:30 or whatever just to make it.
Yeah.
But man, that first service, people that come out early.
What's funny is for the most part, the first service crowd are the more awake, ready to like hear it and like get about their day. And second service, it could also be just because I'm kind of tired, and I just have to like push through a little more. And of course, we all know pastors that have 6 services or something like that. This Sunday, we have another church an hour away in a little town called Paulina. And so this Sunday, I'm leading worship for our church. And then I'm teaching both messages. And then I'm also going out to Paulina an hour away for our 4:00 service and leading worship and teaching the message there, which is a different message than our morning service. So it's a 6-set Sunday. I like to call it.
2. So you're leading worship both services and bringing the word, and then you're going to go to Paulina. Are you doing the worship in Paulina as well? Are you doing that because you want to, or?
Yeah,
I know you want to.
It's kind of one of those things that, like, God has called us to do these things, and it's just, normally my associate pastor fills in the 4th Sunday of the month for me, which is also my week to lead worship. And because of the crazy schedules, and we're in this specific gift, spiritual gifts passage in 1 Corinthians 14, I kind of want to be the one to like kind of instruct our body on the use of spiritual gifts for this. So it's not necessarily on purpose, but it lands that way very often where I'm kind of, those 4th Sundays of the month are big days of ministry. But, it's like in the Gospels when there's a lot of ministry going on in Jesus, and I think they had just fed the 5,000, and the end of that story says, and when the day was well spent, and just those are the days I go home and I lay my head on my pillow and I just go, that was a day well spent,
So when is your Sabbath?
When I die. No, I'm kidding.
That's a real question.
Plenty of time to Sabbath when I'm dead. No, yeah, it is a real question. So my pastor, Rob Verdine in Calvary Corvallis, he was a really good example to me on always setting Monday aside to rest. And so I turn my phone off, and sometimes I'll turn my phone back on Monday night or Tuesday morning, and I'll have like 90 messages. And those are sometimes fun family messages, or it's a group thread where silly things were just like rolled around. But you're a pastor, so that you get that one message that's a problem, and it will consume your day. And, your kids tell you, Dad, you got the 1,000-yard stare, and it's our day with you. and you're looking off into space, so I really try to shut my phone off, and my pastor was a good example of that. I really try to have Monday be now Monday. Like this last Monday, I knew I was cowboying during the week, so I used it to study for our midweek study, those kinds of things. But for the most part, Monday, I try to just totally not do ministry stuff.
So I don't call you or text you on Monday.
You just might not hear back from me till Tuesday. And then either Friday or Saturday, I try to have my sermon pretty much done, and then I take it a little lighter, but I'll still be reading those commentaries and things when the family's kind of sitting around, and I'll have my iPad out and I'm studying, but my phone's on, and I'm often fielding questions about the service that week or whatever. But they're a little bit lighter afternoons, things like that. I was kind of hoping to have tomorrow as I did jiu-jitsu on Monday night, just got steamrolled by a big guy about my size as we had to practice rolling together. Just working.
Did you say he's bigger than you?
He's probably equal in size to me, but he's a former wrestler, and so he's very aggressive and competitive, and I'm not.
He's cheating.
Yeah.
Just
but hey, I did make him tap out a time or two, so that was fun. Just as we were rolling. But I just was hurting so bad after that. And then Tuesday was branding, which is very physical, cowboying, roping, throwing big calves around. So sore. Chasing bulls, so sore. Yesterday's branding. Like today, I'm like, my body is exhausted, and I was like, oh, just Saturday, maybe I can just like melt into something, And I'm like, oh man, I got to get my study done for 1 Corinthians 14. No big deal, not a big passage, just proper use of the gift of tongues and prophecy in the public setting. So it's going to be a bit. And then the six set Sunday coming up in just a couple days, but
that's a fun passage to try to decipher for the body.
Yeah.
One of the pastors we connected with years ago, I think 15 years ago. One of the things he talked about is giving his leadership a safe place or safe space to work out those things that you're going to teach about. Mm-hmm. And I never had that concept before because part of my life grew up Pentecostal. So, we got the sha-da-da-da-das and the Hayandes and casting out of demons and just people. And as a kid, I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
And I didn't disrespect it in any way, but it was still like, wow, this is like an actual poltergeist movie right in front of me. So I don't envy you in having to decipher those things. I think it's good that you guys are doing. Even 1 Corinthians 12, I love that. That's a great way to segue to what you're going to do. Right. But so when you're doing all that, do your kids have access to you when you're doing your sermon prep and you're doing they knock on the door?
Yeah, I multitask in sermon prep pretty well. So maybe not in other things in life, but in and maybe other things in life too. I'm cowboying with my phone to my ear, talking, counseling somebody through as I'm, but my kids are pretty much like around me while I'm doing this, and I can kind of like almost have an ear to them and an ear to this, pretty well. Not everybody can do that. And then my office it's downstairs in this big giant area that we have that has some shape to it. So like I can be studying and they can maybe be watching a show around the corner in the main big room. And then they'll run over and hug me, and then we'll, mess around, so it's pretty, and then, I'll take a break and we'll do something. So it's really, it works good for me because I can hop out, do something, come right back to it. Or then say we are out in the yard kicking the ball around, and then I just sit on the grass for a little while and read another number of paragraphs from a commentary.
Well, I think it's good for them too, right? Knowing that dad is always accessible, no matter what he's doing.
Yeah.
And I think like when we pray to God, I don't think God's like, hold on, I'm busy right now.
Yeah.
Let me go take care of this thing in LA or California.
Yeah.
He's always accessible to us.
Yeah.
I think that's.
My oldest daughter teases me for that 1,000-yard stare though.
She does.
She'll just know, like, I'll just like be looking past her or even at her, and I'm just like, it's funny because maybe it's just a man thing, but I'll be like in another world thinking through how this difficult conversation is going to go, and I don't even hear my wife or my daughter talking. So those are difficult, for me, but they just laugh about it, and then it snaps me too, and then I'm able to get back to
the video he sent me. Yes, I watched it. I'm like, that looks like your youngest son. I think, wait, no, it can't be, because that's 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow, your kids look so much like your boys, man.
They're cloned.
Yeah,
I have 2 boys and 2 girls, boy, girl, and they're separated by 5 years in between the sets. And so like the older 2, they're quite a bit older, and then the younger ones, but they're almost cloned physically, and but the personalities are swapped. So, yeah, but the girl's more like the boy, and it's just funny. But
I'm just glad my daughters look like the mom and not the dad.
Pretty lucky thing.
Be in trouble.
Yeah, for sure.
If it's okay, I got to ask, why the fostering?
Yeah. So my wife always had wanted to adopt since she was young. And so years ago, we tried to adopt locally. So we went through the whole DHS classes, and they said, hey, if you want to adopt, you got to wait till the last class, and we'll talk about adopting through the system. And so we waited till the last class, and the lady that was there was from our county, and her hair was all like, like she'd had a hard day. And she said, yeah, if you're from Crook County and you're trying to adopt, it's never going to happen. She said, it's Tuesday and I've already put in 40 hours, and we can't get through the red tape to get you ready to adopt. So it was a shut door. So then we tried to adopt through Burkina Faso, Africa, and we went through the paperwork for that. We were just about to send our check, and the organization over there, which was the only organization to the United States, called us and said, sorry to tell you, but we've been here for 30 years and we're closing our organization. So another shut door. So then number of years went by where we were like, the Lord just must not have that for us. And I was out cowboying at the ranch an hour away. We were working cattle through a chute, kind of a processing line that we can give them medicine. And the veterinarian, it was a really cold day. The veterinarian and a couple of the ranch hands and myself were standing around a big burn barrel trying to get warm. And the veterinarian had been caring for his granddaughter, and she was like his foster daughter through the DHS system. And then one of the ranch hands was just finishing up certification to be a foster parent. And we were talking about how that's such a biblical thing to do, is to adopt or draw the orphan into your home and care for them when they can't give anything back to you. And they're the least of these, and they're the people that the Lord is really zealous about protecting. And we're just, this is just the ways that you're just out there cowboying. You never think, you're covered in cow manure, and can anything good come out of these times? And really incredible things come. And the Lord re-stirred in me right there around that fire that is not only something that I should do, but something that I need to call our body to do. And so that was probably in November of 2020. And we went into our week of prayer and fasting, January 2021, with a message from the book of James about pure and undefiled religion before God and man is this. Specifically, we're going to care for the orphans. And there's such a problem with the children in our county that need homes and love and care. We're the ones that need to be doing that as Christians. Yep. Who better to do that? And so we went through the certification process all over again, those good number of classes that you do. And at the time, there had been a sibling set of 5 siblings that we were going to take in. And then that they actually went to another family in our church. Didn't work out for us to have them, but another family in our church have them.
That's the one that sits in front of us.
Yep. Yeah. You always sit in front of them. Yep. And I think probably 3 of those siblings are in that family, and then the other 2 went somewhere else. But and so then it was like, it seemed like a shut door. And we would look at the website and try to get kids we'd been just wanting to adopt because we had heard how difficult the foster thing is. And also especially you give your heart to these kids, and then then they have to go home and it's just too hard. It's too sad. Or even going home, it's not a healthy situation. And so we're like, I'll never do that. We want to adopt, but not foster.
Yeah.
And then every time we would put our names out for kids that were on the website, like we wouldn't even get a call back, or nope, they were just taken. Nope, they were just taken. Nope, they were just taken. And then we had a little girl come into our home through family connections, and she lived with us for a year and a half. And she was
foster a year and a half.
Yes, so she was a year and a half old also. And so we basically raised her up until she was about 3 and just loved her like a little girl. And ended up she went back to her parents. And so that's a whole nother story of difficulty in the foster care.
Oh, yeah.
But just to say that we have a boy right now in our home that's been with us for a couple months, and just
has it been a couple months?
Yes, I think it was like Valentine's Day that he came, so it's been a few months. And but anyways, to answer your question, why foster care? I mean, it's funny because we were really more trying to adopt, and then the Lord has taught us something through this about that little window that those kids that are in that situation could have of stability and pointing them to Jesus and patience with them and discipline and correction and all those kinds of things. That may be the only bit of that they'll ever get. And a friend of mine who's probably in his 60s now said that he was a foster kid when he was 2, but they taught him about Jesus, and that is what stuck with him later on in life. And so, maybe to just build upon with our little girl situation, we still love her.
Yeah.
Of course we do. I mean, it's not, but what I mean is like, if you could love anybody the way that you love your own children, this is how we feel about this little girl. And we had to work with the system with her going home when it was not in her best interest. And
that's tough.
For all intents and purposes that was communicated to us, it was going to be a drastic, and they knew it. It was going to be a drastic thing for her, or a bad thing for her. And she would be back in the system soon. And because we asked questions that, to me, I thought these are just common questions that any human being would ask if they're concerned for somebody. That caused the system to become retaliatory towards us, and then fought us all the more and pushed her towards the danger all the more. So we ended up going to court, and just to get what was called, oh goodness, a year ago I was in court for this, and now I don't even remember. It was a certain status where we had the right, because we had her for a year, to be privy to the information. The system likes to hide behind that there's minors involved. And so, it's a minor, you can't know anything. It's like, she lived with me for a year and a half. I taught her how to go to the bathroom and eat, and And so, anyways, we won the status that could keep us privy to information, but we could also bring evidence before the court if there were any concerns that we had. And so, but man, I'll tell you what, like, we had 3 attorneys that were against us. And, I like to be liked by people. I don't like confrontation. There were 3 attorneys that were there fighting against us that hated me. They had no dog in the hunt whatsoever, but they hated me for challenging. And it was like a Law and Order episode with objections every other sentence. We had a really good attorney. And we had a really good judge that was very fair and defended us. But she had to tell the attorneys multiple times that they were being retaliatory towards us and disrespectful to us. And so we had to fight very hard to get that status. And then the evidence that we presented showed that what the system knew, like the judge just said, I'm ashamed that I never knew that this was going on. And kind of scolded the system. And then the child's attorney said it would be in her best interest to continue relationship with us. And I thought that makes sense, And then we were fought every step of the way just to have visitation rights. and we had to hire a what's called a professional witness, which is essentially like a child counselor that could speak towards the need for us to remain in her life. And turns out there's no such thing as professional witness. Like, you have to have certain credentials to be a professional witness. And so I called every psychologist that I know. In fact, think on an advertisement before your show, I'm like, I should know that person. But there's like all the psychologists I know and child therapists and everything, they're like, I was a professional witness once. It's impossible to keep that status. And so I was like, I guess this is the end of the road. We're not going to get to be with her because we can't provide a child witness. And I was just like, last ditch effort, just Googled like professional witness for child court case. I don't remember what I typed. And it went to one of those random websites that you're like, this can't even be real. And I was like, here's a guy named Roy. My name's Rory. I'm going to just click this button. And I called him. He's in New York City. And I leave a voicemail and I hang up, and he calls me right back. And he's in Manhattan, and I can hear the traffic's honking. The car's honking behind him. And he goes, who is this? And I go, oh, it's Rory Rodgers. I just left a message for you. He goes, oh, weird. I was just on a call and the call dropped. And so I just called back the number that was last on my phone. He's like, why are you calling me? And I told him our story. And he's like a little bit shell shocked. He has PTSD from being a professional witness against child neglect and abuse cases. And he just got done doing a case against the Boy Scouts of America. He's been on Dateline and stuff. And he's like, yeah, I'll be your professional witness. Give me your lawyer's number right now. So
do they have to be like with attorney credentials, like lawyer, to have that?
That would be more of like a therapist type that he needed to be that witness. So he just phoned in, and, all of it cost us so much money, but the crazy thing is how the Lord provided for it, but now we know a lot after being through that now I have a bit of a vision to have a nonprofit that helps give foster families knowledge of things to be looking for, things to be asking, protecting the kids, and then a little bit of an expose of the system. And
so now you're given, like they were exposed in certain areas, and I think that's powerful as a body of Christ to pray against those. I look at it as there's demonic assignments that have been there long enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And no more. Enough.
Yeah. We've been fasting so much for this. And I do have vision, and I was waiting to kind of begin this nonprofit. I have like a whole thing written out. I'm looking at your podcast equipment going, we may be needing this for, I think we've talked about it before, but the crazy thing is my attorney said, Rory, if you really want to make change in the system, you need to get on the governor's review board for foster care.
Get in the system.
You got to get, it's technically
not
separate. I thought it was, but it's technically separate, and it's a governor's informative board. It's a commission position that the legislator has to accept you on. And I was like, I don't even know how to go about that. But you know how the Lord just does things and moves you ways. So I find out that there's 2 openings. And so I put my name in that. It's a full application thing you got to do. It's all this stuff, step by step. The chairwoman of the board calls me, and I tell her of our situation and what we went through with the daughter. By the way, we were what do you call it when you're suspended? We were suspended from the system because we challenged the system. So we were told, you're suspended until you take this class. And so we had to take the whole class over again. And basically they waved their finger at us and said, so don't challenge us. It's not about the best interests of the child. It's about reunification with the family, no matter what. Are you down with that? And we're like, we'll take in kids that need help. They're like, okay, here's another kid. But so when I told the chairwoman of the board what we had been through, she wept, and she said, nobody fights for the kids like that. Nobody goes to court for the kids. Nobody's doing that. And she thanked me for doing that. And so I was invited to come to a meeting, and I was in on the board meeting, and everything was looking good. And then methinks our great governor has found out who I am and what I believe in, and I was not accepted onto the board yet. There's a chance in the summer, but I've been holding off on just on our vision because maybe that was going to be a good avenue, and it may not be, and so we may be moving forward with what's called Guardians of Hope, which is our just protecting foster kids and looking out for their best interests, and then helping foster parents.
We'll support
be able to do
that. I think I speak for my wife. We'll support whatever. Our oldest daughter, we fostered her for 4 years, 3 years. I forget. I'm bad at math. And we adopted, right?
Yeah.
And I will say that even though there's the bloodline where they come from, one of the things I always told her, because she struggled.
Yeah.
I told her, I said, whether you're biological or adopted, God entrusted you to us, just like our biological. God didn't have to give us our biological kids. He trusted us enough to give. And I always through that, Psalm 139, right? Before you were born, I knew you. Everything, all my thoughts outnumber the grains of sand. I told that's how God thinks about you. It doesn't matter how you feel about how dad treats you, because when you have foster kids, sometimes they'll say, you're not my dad,
Right.
No. And so I think it's powerful. Like, whatever you guys do, man, I want to speak life and blessings over that. Because, even Hawaii, same thing. Yeah, it's reunification of the families. And I agree. But also, if there's an underlying agenda by the enemy to use it as a blanket to usher in just the evil that's been going on, that's why we have foster programs in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's hard to not get emotional. I'll share this with you. We had 3 foster kids. They weren't through the state, but they were family, and they lived with us for a specific amount of time. And my sister-in-law, I don't know if she'll ever watch this, but they were going through a tough time, and we had to make some tough decisions. Remove them out of the home, but keep the kids, and that was hard. I was younger, so the way I dealt with it probably is not the best way, but it was about protecting these children. Years later, these kids are all grown up, Rory. They still know who we are.
Yeah. Right.
You're Coco, she's Mimi.
Yeah.
We don't mess with you. You loved us.
Yeah.
And then the mom, my wife's sister, her and the husband, man, they're serving the Lord.
Amazing.
But the oldest one, when my wife was taking care of her, we'd take her to church and she would sing all these songs. And even though we didn't adopt her, and to this day, I'm glad we didn't, because that's their mom. And she would go home to the mom and sing these church songs.
Yeah.
She had the words all wrong. It was pretty funny. She would sing the wrong
totally.
words, but the presence of God was in that home.
Yeah.
Because of this little 2-year-old girl, just whatever song she heard in church, she was singing at home.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And I think with what you guys are doing, with the foster, I think that's a powerful thing, right? You deliver something to this child, and if for some reason the state takes them back, they've got that.
Yeah. I should tell the good part of the story is we won all the court stuff, and we were granted visitation. And, our purpose of challenging wasn't to then cause another traumatic instance of her being removed from her parents' care, which was what the attorneys were saying we were trying to do. We just wanted to show how the system lied and, whatever. But we were able to be put in her life again and in her parents' lives. And now the Lord has made us like family. We bust them over for Thanksgiving. They've come and visited us. We pray for them. They call us, and so we are seeing God's sovereignty in the whole thing, which we never doubted, but we did weep a lot. I mean, my dad died when I was 19 and I wailed when he died, but I wailed a billion times more over this little girl that was like my daughter, but now we have her parents in our life, and now we feel like, well, now we're grandparents to this little girl, because are we really old enough to have like a 21-year-old?
You're 44?
43, yeah.
43.
Yeah, so it's like her parents are old enough to be our kids, and we're loving on them and mentoring them. And now she's like almost like our grandchild. So we have relationship. They call us if she gets hurt to just let us know, all that. And so we see God's sovereignty in all of it.
Now, when we first met, that was kind of recent.
Well, yeah, it was a year ago that, it's funny. I was branding that same set of calves for the same ranch I was at yesterday. And he's like, a year ago, you had to leave the branding and go to court. I was like, yeah, that was a year ago.
I remember you sharing that story. I don't know where we were.
Yeah.
But you were getting heavily emotional. And
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, man. So I was in Romans 8 when we were going through it. In Romans 8, it's all about suffering and the trials. And I was very vulnerable with our church. And I would wail from the pulpit, like what we were going through. It was like we had a death in the family. And we were fasting and praying as a church at that time. And I was very transparent with the church, what we were going through. I had all kinds of stress and anxiety and heart things going on because of it, Yeah. But I'm pretty transparent like that. Our family, we call ourselves the living tear ducts. I weep regularly.
It's healthy.
Yeah. And but it helps other people realize, like, hey, like there's consolation and comfort that we give each other in times like that, and we weep together. So, and then, our attorney said there was retribution against us and we were suspended and we had to go through these classes, and we were just like stepping out in faith. We're like, it's not about any of this. It's about these kids that need someone solid in these times. And so, how you just next step, just take the next step. Well, we finally, at Valentine's Day, we get a call that, because there was nothing, like, I don't think we were actually getting any options from the system. I think they're like, stay away from those Rodgers, and we finally get a boy, 11-year-old boy, and kind of hear about the different problems that he's had. And you know how it is, like, we're going to go pick him up, and I'm like having a panic attack because I'm like, this could be a total problem kid, and I don't know if can I handle having a problem child? Like, what am I doing? And just the minute we met him, I'm like, okay, this is going to be good. And if I could just share, this boy, he's 11 years old and never has known a dad, and he just, I told him, okay, I'm a pastor, so we're at the church a lot. It's kind of like home away from home. And he's like, hey, it's like, I go to the Good News Club at my school. He's like, I've never been to church, but do you want to hear all the books of the Bible? And he just rattles off all the books of the Bible to me. And I was, our kids are like, I don't know if I can do that, Dad, And then he had never been to church until his first Sunday with us. And he loves it, loves church, took communion for the first time with me. And he was baptized this Sunday on Easter service. He wanted to be baptized. And, of course, if you've been a part of the system and all, it's like, we're not like forcing this kid to become a Christian. Like, he was a Christian before we even met him, but now we're discipling him. And so we're teaching him. He's never had a man in his life. And so I'm really getting to pour into him basic principles of being a responsible person and then becoming a man. And so he's like learning how to cowboy. He's ridden a horse he had a horse run away with him, and I had to run up on my horse and like kind of catch him, but like stuff that's like, he's just doing things that, like some legit life experiences. And he, I just said, hey man, I know you've had a lot of people fail you in life, but I'm just going to tell you, I love you. You don't have to say it back, but we're a loving family and we hug and stuff. And so whenever you're ready, and 2 weeks ago, I was teaching 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, and I made him sit in on that so he could hear some things like love isn't rude, love doesn't boast, certain things. It's like good for even you to hear, and he comes up to me afterwards up on the stage and he goes, can I tell you something? That's like his thing. Can I tell you something? I love you, and so I was like, I love you too, buddy, so, but we are learning, like, you just got to hold loosely, like, and I just told him, like, we don't know. We've been told that we were going to adopt kids before and they took them away from us. And so we just want you to know, like, we don't know what's going to happen, but as long as you're in our home, you're like my son and you can walk with me with your head up that, like, this is my dad and I'm protected and I'm safe and I'm provided for and I'm secure. He's not going to boot me. And I said, however long you're with us, or however, even if they take you from us, if you want to be a part of this family, like, you're mine, So he
Come on, Rory.
Oh man, I haven't even gotten to really tell what led up to that, but I won't do that to you another time probably.
Let me squish this to your back.
Oh man, I know.
Hold on, let me squish it back.
It's the story of my life. Gosh, you know what? It was crazy because he was, when you have kids come live with you, like, with your nieces and nephews, it's like they eat a different way maybe than like the manners that you've taught kids. And maybe they sit at a seat or at the table where like, well, that's Lindsay's spot. Don't you know that's Lindsay's spot? And you just had 3 pieces of bread slathered in butter. You don't need another 3 pieces of bread slathered, just like, and just kind of getting impatient. That was like probably week 2 that he was with us, that I was just like kind of a little put off, I think would be the way to say it. And I sent him off to school and I'm cleaning up and he kind of like mess around the table, and I'm like, and the Lord goes, remember Mephibosheth. And I'm not reading about Mephibosheth or anything like that. He says, remember Mephibosheth. And I don't know if you've ever heard the Leland song, He Brought Me to the Table. Yeah. But that song came to my heart.
That's the redhead guy.
Yeah, the redheaded guy, yeah. And he just, there's that, he brought me to the table, seated where I don't belong. He brought me to the table, swept away by his love. And I don't see my brokenness anymore when I'm seated at the table of the Lord. And I just was like, the Lord was like, you know what? This kid, he knows he doesn't belong there. He knows that's not his seat at the table. He's aware that he's different and that at any moment he could just be booted out. That's been his entire life. But Mephibosheth was broken, was an inconvenience, but was loved. And he didn't see his brokenness anymore when David brought him in. And the Lord just brings that up to me every time that I'm just a little bit like, nobody taught you, that you don't.
Did you drive up to school and go hug him after that?
Dude, so he was at the Good News Club and I picked my other kids up and I took him to taco time while we were waiting. And I was trying to dig and I was like, how's it going with you kids and with him? And they're like, pretty good, and you can tell like he likes to tell tall stories. And so my kids like to call him like, that's not true. Stop saying the tall story, And so they're like really getting like, stop with the tall stories, the tall tales, And I was just like, how's it going? They're like, okay. And I go, let me tell you about Mephibosheth. And I told them all about Mephibosheth. And I was like, he knows he doesn't belong and he's never had anybody love him like us. You guys have had it your entire life. You've known nothing but that. And so may the Lord help us remember to Mephibosheth. And so as we're driving to pick him up, I played that Leland song and we roll up and he hasn't come out yet to get picked up. And all of us are bawling in the car. And then he comes out and I'm like, okay, guys, put your tears away. Like, why? And he opens the door and we're like, hey, And so, yeah. And then we just gave him hugs and so it was just good for me to remember that. It's just a picture of the gospel. We're all the Mephibosheths. And he graciously has brought us into the home.
You ever watch Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember watching the final episode ever?
It's been a long time. I've probably seen it, but
it's the last episode ever. And they say that is Will Smith's greatest acting of his whole career.
Wow.
And that's where his biological dad comes back into his life and basically disappoints him.
Yeah.
But there's a scene in there where the dad basically leaves him again, and Will Smith is trying to act like everything's fine. I'm a grown man now. And then that switch flipped and He got angry. And through all those shouting, he said, why didn't he just love me? And I'm like, even to this day, I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
How important is to have a dad? And then when he said that, Uncle Phil didn't say anything, grabbed him. And
I do remember that. Yep.
Oh, man. The water was.
Yeah, for sure.
How important is to have a dad? Mm-hmm. Like, just to love you. You don't have to be your biological. My gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got to take a break. I gotta pee. Sorry, family. I gotta clear my face. Are you okay with that? Take a quick break. Yeah,
absolutely.
Can you play the I don't care, play anything and do it on repeat. And for anybody that doesn't know Rory, he's just he's a great friend, great pastor, a great leader. He's a leader among men. When we say iron sharpens iron, he's the iron. and I'm glad. But I got to take a break, man. He's making me cry. Boogers come out of my nose.
I've been trying to hold it in myself.
Are we good? You can pick anyone, honey. Today's episode is brought to you by One Shot Energy Voice Drops. They are a low-sugar yuzu honey lozenge that soothes and protects your throat and voice with an infusion of slippery elm, marshmallow, and licorice root. Whether you are a full-time gamer, public speaker, pastor, preacher, teacher, maybe you like doing podcasting, you got to get your hands on these voice drops by OneShotEnergy.com. Be sure to use my promo code AMBGLO for 10% off your entire order. Speaking of crying, there was a guy in South Carolina. I used to live in South Carolina as a kid. And I thought he had a mental condition because every time he started talking, he just started shaking real hard and he started crying. I'm like, wow, what's wrong with this guy? And then he started, he did a sermon, or he preached one Sunday, and he started just reading the word. And every time he got to the red letters, he just started weeping. And then after a while, I kind of figured it out. Anytime he reads something that Jesus said, it hit him. He couldn't stop weeping. So I just thought he had a mental condition, but he was passionately reading, and he would cry. And he had his handkerchief. I don't know what it is. In Hawaii, we don't have handkerchiefs.
Yeah.
But in the mainland, he had his handkerchief. He'd always wipe his eyes.
Yeah.
But I was like, wow, I want to be like that.
Yeah.
When I read,
Tender.
when I read certain things of what God said, and
For sure.
But anyways, you did that like literally 5 minutes ago, talking about being a dad.
Yeah.
So I will say this. I know you and I were talking, but whatever chapter God has you walk through, man, we want to be close by
Awesome.
on that. We really do. I will say, I will tell you this. I'm glad that we're here in Oregon. Like, we didn't want to be here. I ain't gonna lie.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that we don't like the place. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Going up to the reservoir.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Mini Grand Canyon.
I love the ocean, but there's something really quiet, and you don't have like waves crashing and tourists screaming and shouting at nobody goes where we go. We go in the back. You go in the back. Yeah. Right before you go to Post, there's that back entrance.
Yeah. Wow. You guys are brave. Taking that.
Is that a bad place to go?
No, it's just a little more of a rugged way to go. So yeah.
Well, I love it.
Yeah. Nice.
And then there's 5G back there.
Oh, good. Wow.
Yeah. So,
it's like being in Nepal.
Yeah. Yeah. But then we see the signs. There's bears and it says you're in bear or mountain lion country. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's true or.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of sightings of cougars and bears and things. Although, like when I've been hunting, I've seen some bears, but I'm out a lot. And
where do you see the bears?
More up in the Ochako Mountains right here. And they'll just, black bears, and they're just kind of cruising around. And then there's a lot of mountain lion sightings by the ranchers out there. Although I never have seen one just in all my time out there. But coyotes, lots of coyotes.
Will the mountain lions back off if you approach them, or will they be aggressive?
Believe that they're more aggressive. Yeah. They'll kind of stalk you and...
Yeah, because I think they're always watching you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're
like sharks.
They're probably watching you if you're out cruising through.
If I was to ask you, are there mountain lions? And of course there are.
Yeah, same with sharks. Yeah.
Are there sharks?
Yeah, they're probably watching you. Yeah, it's good to have some sort of a weapon or some way to defend yourself against them if you're kind of out and about.
So if I'm out at that back end of the reservoir, should I, just for good measure?
You might want to have una pistola. Yeah, not a huge deal. I mean, I try to keep one with me if I'm secluded in a secluded spot and I'm hiking or something, and I definitely have a pocket knife with me that, it's kind of like a last resort sort of a thing, but
across the neck.
Yeah. Although I have heard of a guy that was a jiu-jitsu practitioner that has killed a cougar.
Somebody asked question. Somebody asked that question to Joe Rogan, and they said, what's the chances of you actually getting around a mountain lion and choking it out?
Yeah.
I always wonder if that's possible.
I know. Might be something to Snopes. Did it really happen?
Well, before we land the plane, I do want to just, for anybody that wants to connect, it's CalvaryPrineville.com. Mm-hmm. And that app, I will say, you can go to the website and connect with them, and you want to support them in any way. But the app, I will say the app, is it through Subsplash?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That is the best thing ever.
It's been handy. Yeah. As a church, we used Facebook a lot and just had like private groups where we would communicate with each other as a church. But probably at least a quarter of the church would not touch Facebook and didn't have a Facebook. So we would miss out on a lot of fellowship and communication that because people don't, Facebook's a communist. I just remember people would tell us that,
Well, now we're CCP.
Yeah, I know. And so on the app, it's abbreviated as Calvary Chapel Prineville as CCP. And so.
Yeah, not CCCP.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And I think I feel okay texting in the middle of service.
Yes, that counts. Yeah. I mean, we love it. You usually praising the Lord for something then too. So
Yeah. And it's socially acceptable.
right.
And I think the groups, I think I think the word is it connects everybody. And I think with the prayer requests, I think it's powerful. You know, the other day I asked, I can't say this publicly, but so we can put stuff on there and it's almost like we have no excuse, you know?
Yeah.
I put it there.
Yeah.
And so we've been asking God to just, and I think I shared with you the other day, like, Lord, where do you want us to just help and serve? I don't care. Like we were just talking about, it doesn't matter if it's a broom or if it's up on a stage. We don't care. You know, it's just, I know the shoes you wear, and I think it's fun to watch it from the outside.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But we do want to help in any way, you know. Childcare, I don't know. Those kids will go home with bad habits.
Yes, totally. Oh my goodness. Well, it's been really fun. It's good to know that you know a lot of the struggles of ministry and the blessings of ministry, and then to have you as a worship leader and your kids are musicians, and to have you get to lead worship with us or for us a few times is like total godsend for us, because you can almost not have too many worship leaders, you know.
God did something in the past couple of weeks, and I think this past, was it Wednesday? I think you and Lindsay were, and just that freedom. I think that's the only way I can think of. And I think there's a certain freedom that's happening, and I see. We're like your Calvary in Prineville is the first church we've been to where there are so many men with the families.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't know if you experience that in other places, but I don't know if it's an Oregon thing, but for sure, we don't see a lot of that. Actually, even when we went to Oklahoma City, and we didn't see a lot of men in proportion to the body, like how this church is.
Praise the Lord. Wow.
So I think that's really powerful because, man, the men are leading. Whether it's through attendance or through actual being active, the fact that they're showing up first and foremost.
Yeah. That's awesome. Now that you mention that, I think I do see that now, but I don't know if I've noticed it until now.
But it could be the region too. I don't know, because I'm sure in different areas, like big cities, you might have a different dynamic, you know, different demographic. A lot of the families here are hardworking.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we're here. I really am.
Yeah. It's wonderful to have you.
I will say, if we have time, the pastoring hat, and you can condense this as much as you need to, but why the pastoring hat? Of all the hats you could have worn, why the pastor's hat?
Probably the just calling, having gone from being a lukewarm Christian as a kid to witnessing an outpouring of the Holy Spirit and revival among teenagers when I was in high school, to then tasting of a Bible study that made me hungry for the word. I wanted to bring that to people so that they were hungry for the word too, and could know the Lord and love the book, And so, but when I was a kid, there was a prophecy over me that I was going to be a singing, preaching cowboy. And the funny thing is, yeah, it was funny. And there's a Precious Moments poster of this little cowboy, and he's singing with a bunch of like little animals by a fence post, And I had that in my room as a little kid, and I was like, that's going to be you. And the funny thing is, there can be different prophecies over your life or callings on your life, and you'll wonder, well, how's that ever going to happen? We left our cattle ranch when I was a kid for my dad to go back to vet school, and that kind of put us into the city life, and somewhat what seemed permanently. And then we'd move to a more rural area, and I'd be exposed back to the ranching aspect, and I'd work on ranches and cowboy and stuff. And then you end up back in the city life for a while, and you just wonder, is that still a calling on my life? And I still felt the call to reach ranchers. That was something I'd always wanted to do, was get out there so the ranchers could know Jesus. And so I love teaching the word. It's a gifting. We always joke that, when I am tired and I'm thinking of resigning or whatever, or had a hard week, it's like, well, I know this. The cowboy pastors that I'm in touch with, a couple rancher and pastors, they use the word, I'm ruined. I'm ruined.
Ruined.
Yeah. And it just means like, well, I could quit this, but I know that I'm a believer and I know that I believe in Jesus and I know he calls me to be involved in a church. So I'm going to go to church. I know he calls me to use my gifts and to know what my gifts are. Well, my giftings are teaching and leading and things like that. Well, then I'm going to be doing that. Next thing you know, you're just back to being a pastor again, so I'm ruined to like, I can't go back, unless the Lord calls me to something else. So I just know, my calling and my passions and I love combining all the different ones from coaching soccer to, leading a mission trip or maybe fostering or being a cowboy, pastoring is the number one thing. And all the other things are so that the word can get out to the community around me, You
ever heard of the reference, the fivefold? I'm sure you've heard of the fivefold in scripture with help of the fivefold ministry. And
yes,
you definitely are. I think I've used this many times where I talk about, in terms of, we talk about the apostles and the, what is this? The evangelist?
Mm-hmm.
No, prophet.
Yeah.
They point which way to go. The longest finger is your evangelist. They have the biggest reach to the places of DePaul. Mm-hmm. And you got the pastors who are the ones with the ring. They're committed to the body.
Yeah.
And then you've got the one who kind of brings it all together to make sure nobody, hey, you're out of line. That's the teacher.
Yeah.
And he has the closest connection to the one that leads it all
Yeah.
in the apostolic. And I think you're very heavy pastoral, and I love that. I was looking through some old photos and videos how I don't even know what was being said, but I look at the posture and I look at little things like you get up close, you get your leg up on something, and you're into that person. I can't remember what it was. I think the old building you guys were at.
Mm-hmm.
And it just reminded me how I think important that is to have, that like how I fell into it. I said, God, I will never be a pastor ever.
Mm-hmm.
Because I grew up with my family, my dad and my uncles and my cousins, and it's like, I don't want to do that. But God opened the doors where I almost felt like I'm not equating myself to Jonah, but almost like, no, I don't want to go.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But God's like, oh no, here you go. This is the way. But we've been blessed, and I do appreciate that you guys have a very heavy value on the teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has an excuse.
Yep.
Nobody can say, I didn't know. No, it's this month.
We've gone through the word.
For a whole month, we talked about this passage.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Has God ever pulled up the e-brake on you when you're in the middle of teaching? Have you ever had a moment where God's just stop?
Not a regular thing.
I haven't. Just a random question.
Yeah. But I'm always open to it. Just I always am praying, Lord, just if there's something else that another direction that you're wanting to go here, or we have done like praying for healing, in between, or maybe there has been like a missionary that was sharing that was just going to do like a 20-minute thing, and it was like, keep going, and I something like that. But no, I've never there may have been a time, but I think it would have been a while ago that
I've never had it happen.
Yeah.
Although I was in a worship band one time when they had the timer.
Yeah.
And I was playing guitar. I'm not even joking. I was playing guitar. I would say the name, Sue Grand Alabanza, just saying it. I was playing guitar for 2.5 hours.
Wow.
And my hands were like.
Yeah, right. We did have, it was like Easter Sunday, 2015. And we had been praying and fasting it'd been April. It was the week before Easter. We'd had a Passion Week fast for 5 days. We read through the book of Acts as a church together while we were fasting. And we prayed that a work like the book of Acts happened in our church. And that Sunday, we had a horse trough there in the sanctuary and ready to baptize people.
Trough.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I was like, does anybody want to get baptized? It was after the service, and it was kind of crickets for just a little bit. And then one of our deacons' wives stood up from the sound booth. She was helping back there, got up, walked all the way down, got baptized.
And suddenly,
yeah,
there came like a mighty rushing wind.
It came like, so
Wow.
I think we had, that Sunday, we had 2 services, but I think we had 30 people get baptized in first service at the end of the service. Well, that ate into the next service time. So people are showing up for second service and we're still dunking people that are getting baptized then. And so then we had probably another 10 or 15 get baptized. So a total of 40, 45 people got baptized that Easter Sunday.
Wow.
And so that shifted what things were going to look like that Sunday. It wasn't quite what I had planned, but
She was the kindling.
she was the kindling. It was incredible. Yeah.
And God brought the torch.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, before I do my rapid fire, anything you want to share before we do our rapid fire?
Thankful for the opportunity to share.
I'm hopefully one of many.
I would say that, let me share one thing.
Yeah.
Everything that's shared, I hope it's known that it's the grace of God.
Yeah.
And like, again, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just like a vessel. But I think one thing that marks my life is when God gives you a vision,
Mm-hmm.
besides, just like the wise thing of like getting some counsel about it or something like that. Praying and fasting is huge in my life. But when he's given you a vision for something, don't tarry and don't dilly-dally. Run at it. Run at that vision and watch God provide. Watch God protect. Watch God fight for you. Watch God bring people into your life to help you accomplish that vision. And that's really the story of my life for every one of these things. I knew God wanted us to have a global vision. We don't know what we're doing. We just prayed and fasted about it. And God opened up just an insane, something like an adventure across the world that most people don't even get to dream about. Had a heart for ranchers and cowboying. That's an expensive thing to do that takes a lot of time. And how am I going to get horses and trailers and all these different things? And how are ranchers going to let me even come onto their property?
Yeah.
Like, that's all major uphill giants that you got to battle. Just run at it and watch him do it. Every one of these things, fostering, we have retribution from the system against us, and we still feel like we're supposed to do this. But the more you are like, I could never do something like that. It would be too hard for me to do that. The more you neglect that, you're missing out on the open door that the Lord has for you. And he may still use it later, but my experience when I've dilly-dallied is it doesn't end up being as powerful as it could have been if you just had run at it. I say the minute, but there's the due diligence of like, is it biblical? What do my wise counselors say? Like those sorts of things. But overall, I think you're called to this or that. Then go for it. Don't wait. Get after it and watch the Lord provide, and he gets all the glory.
I just repented. Just now. I ain't gonna lie. All right, rapid fire. This is not a trick question. It's something I always ask. Number one is, why did you do this podcast today?
Well, I really love you and appreciate you. And you had told me about the podcast when we first met. And so that's intriguing to me. I've been on a couple podcasts this year. Well, this is my second one this year. And so it's kind of fun to do something different. And you had mentioned kind of right after Nepal that you'd like to have me on after I shared about Nepal. And so it's a good opportunity to stir people's hearts towards the unreached and unengaged people groups. And then I love to tell my story. Sometimes I go a long time without telling it. But the Lord has just been so faithful. I love to just applaud him for the good things that he's done. So, and I thought it'd be a fun chance to hang out with you. I didn't even know your wonderful wife was going to be here with us. So that was just a bonus. She's fun to have in the audience.
I'm a one-man band, but I need help too. Question number 2. You got to pick one. Snakeskin boots or caiman crocodile boots?
Crocodile. I don't know about caiman. I don't know what that is.
It's the little micro crocodile they have in the South.
Okay. Well, I don't know that I know what that skin looks like, but I am a boot guy, cowboy boot guy.
Is it acceptable in this country to wear exotic skin?
Like snake skin's a little bit like 80s.
Okay.
But they're making these sweet looking crocodile skin boots now that are like stylish. So crocodile boot, but I don't know what like came in, you know, I don't care where they come from.
I just feel like if I get those type of boots, like I'm going to be like, they're going to look at me like, he's the fake.
I could see you rolling the snake though.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Question number 3. I can't read my own writing. R.C. Sproul or D.L. Moody?
D.L. Moody.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a big Moody fan. I'm not a Sproul fan. He might be a little more reformed for my taste. And we've had some people like leave the church because I wasn't Calvinist, you know, because they were major Sproul fans. Whereas Moody, the evangelist heart that he has and some principles on leadership.
And Moody was before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, way before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm flexing for you, honey.
Whoa, way before.
My husband was that smart.
Yeah.
Number 4, your favorite scripture of all time. Gotta pick one.
Yeah. I'm going to give you the whole. Oh, God, that scares me. Well, okay. Psalm 67 is a scripture that's changed our church. And it's really like got the high priestly prayer essentially begins with just like, Lord, bless me, be gracious to me, cause your face to shine upon me. And everyone will be like, yes, Lord, yes. But it doesn't end there. The very next verse says, so that your ways may be known among the world, your saving ways among the nations. So it's a God's blessed us so that the world can know his saving ways. And then it has this chorus. I wrote a song basically with the psalm, but there's this chorus that's repeated like, God, our own God, bless us. Let the peoples, all the peoples praise you. And then it speaks about the world will yield its increase so that all the people can know those saving ways of Jesus. And so it's just a great missionary chapter about God brings the blessings and the finances, the funds, the resources so that the world can know God and glorify him. So kind of Psalm 67 has changed our church and it's like our anthem chapter essentially. So great. It's like 6 verses.
It's a great passage and it's a testament to your body.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
I agree. For a second, I thought you were going to say you wrote the blessing, but
yeah, yeah. Ooh, I did.
Number 5, what is the tallest mountain in the world? I don't even know if this is the right word. What is the tallest geologically measured mountain in the world?
I believe that K2 is the tallest mountain from sea level up, you know, as far as like height wise. But Everest is the highest mountain in the world.
From base to top?
Yeah. Yeah. So
I will make an argument.
Okay. So yeah, these are things that
I'm not a smart person.
Okay.
I Google.
Nice.
But Hawaii has the largest mountain in the world.
Oh.
36,000 feet. And it's just a little bit higher than Mount Everest.
No way.
Now, we're not talking obviously elevation. We're talking about the size of the mountain.
Okay.
From where it starts
to
the top.
Yeah. So it beats K2.
So Mauna Kea, I believe, and I'm sure there's been dispute, but Mauna Kea, anybody can fact check.
What? Wow. Where is this?
On the Big Island.
Wow.
Where the snow is.
Yeah. Cool. I had never heard of that.
That's funny. Number 6. Oh, I can't read my own writing. Okay, number 6. You got to pick one. Rocky Mountain oysters or fresh, raw Hawaiian opihi?
What's opihi?
It's a snail, basically.
Rocky Mountain oyster.
Really?
Well, yeah, being a cowboy, you know, you can grill those bad boys up right there for a little snack.
You got to eat them raw. Pick one.
Oh, raw?
Mm-hmm.
Probably the oyster.
Okay. Are they technically oysters, though? Okay.
My uncle used to have a T-shirt from a Rocky Mountain Oyster Festival, and it said, "Testicle Festival. I had a ball." We always laughed. He was banished. Sorry, you're gonna need to edit that out for your crowd.
We're live, so too bad. Number 7. And by the way, fam, I asked Pastor Roy before, hey, are you okay going live? Because, I only do live. I'm not good at pre-recording. He's like, and I didn't think, like, you're live twice a week minimum.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Number 7, money or logistics not an issue. Where do you take your family for 30 days?
We're actually, this is a good question. Probably it would be nice to have some sort of a Hawaiian vacation with the family.
Okay.
Something like that. I like the sound of that.
So first week,
I could go there right now.
First week you do the do the touristy, do the Kalua Pig, the luau.
Yeah.
Second week you do your sightseeing stuff. Third and fourth week you just hang out.
Yeah.
Do nothing.
Yeah. We love that kind of do nothing. My wife especially, just like book, sitting, resting by the beach or by the pool, which is how I like to rest too.
What we're saving for our 30-day, we're doing a Dave Ramsey. Anyways,
nice. Yeah, that's awesome.
What number are we on? Number 8. Who is your earthly hero? We all know Jesus is but who is your earthly hero?
Oh, probably. I would probably say Alistair Begg.
For people that don't know, can you explain?
Yeah, so he pastors Parkside Church in Cincinnati, Ohio, although he's retiring this year. He's famous for the Truth for Life radio broadcast. He's a Scottish guy that I first heard when I was 19 years old and at a pastor's conference. And then I started listening to every sermon he ever did, and he was just like a mentor from a distance, And years ago, probably 2014, he spoke at a conference in Oregon that I went to. And I waited for him to come towards the dining hall. And I said, hey, can I eat with you tonight? And so we ended up getting to eat together. And I told him, you're like a father to me in the faith. And he said, what's your name? And I said, Rory Rodgers. He goes, Rory Rodgers. I'll never forget that name, And so just his faithfulness in the ministry, his wisdom, his experience, he knows the word, like just super incredible. So, I mean, I'm a big military history buff. I love all the heroes of the military campaigns. My dad was a huge hero of mine, but in ministry, besides my own pastor, Rob Verdine, Alistair Begg is like.
So was he Scottish or Scottish?
Good question. But I did tell him when I had dinner with him about the Skittles commercial or Starburst commercial where the camera comes from, have you seen this one? The camera is way out in outer space, coming towards the earth, comes into the earth, comes down to Scotland. The camera zooms into Scotland onto the Scottish Highlanders. There's a little cabin out there. Comes on in, and from a distance, it looks like there's two people sitting in kilts on this Scottish cabin. And as it comes in, you see that both of the people in kilts are Korean. And the dad is sitting there with his son, and they're eating Starburst, and he goes, "You're a walking contradiction," And I told Alistair Begg, that commercially, like, that's hilarious, But yeah, I don't know if it's Scottish, but
I think the people in the UK, like England, they have something against T. And no offense to my friends in the UK, like they don't like the letter T, like Scottish.
Oh yeah, right.
Scottish.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
I like that.
I'm British.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 9. Is that number 9? Oh yeah. Oh, this is my favorite. Okay. You can go back into time at any time frame. Doesn't matter. You're in disguise and nobody would know who you were. Okay. You get to visit your dad at any point in history, whatever it could be, when he's young or older. So you go back in time, whatever time you're choosing, and you get to tell him one thing. What are you going to tell him?
Oh.
At what time frame?
Yeah. Boy, you know how those time machine shows, if you go back and you tell them too much, you could change time. Like, I might not exist if I exhort my dad too soon, So, yeah, I would probably wait till after he had maybe been engaged to my mom or something. He's an incredible cowboy and incredible wrestler. And I would just tell him to start following Jesus now. Life is going to get hard and trials are going to come, but you're going to want a solid foundation for like health battles that he had with cancer and stuff. Start leading your family and start living for Jesus in about that age, 25 or something like that. But he had been married before my mom and had gotten an annulment, and so you just know how the Lord works. Then he met my mom, and then so if I, gotta be careful you don't mess up the time continuum to where he,
don't go too soon. Wait till
yes, wait till I'm gonna still be on the way.
Smart. That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's actually that went a lot better than I expected. Okay, last one. This is an easy one. We've talked about it already, but what is your when you're gone in Hawaii? We say "Maki dai dead." You're dead. You're gone. You passed. What would your desire for the next generation be? You can do your family, your kids, the church, or what is if there was a one phrase, a one sentence, what is your desire for the next generation?
Probably that the next generation follow Jesus, carry on our local church body. Just had a meeting last night where I do want to be serving Jesus until I die, but I don't necessarily want to be the senior pastor that the church dies with me because, it's an old church and the young have never been raised up. So I really am big on discipling the youth, and that would continue, that the youth are always discipled and brought up. You've seen plenty of dead church buildings that have no life in them anymore. And I want ours to be full of life till the Lord returns. I'd love, one of my ancestors started the first church in Tennessee. His name is Tidance Lane. He was a Revolutionary War hero, led the Battle of Kings Mountain with the Over Mountain Men. But he started the church, Buffalo Ridge Baptist Church in Gray, Tennessee. And it's still a church to this day. And it's on fire, and it's mission minded, and it's healthy, and it's, just incredible. So I would love to carry on that heritage of like having raised up good disciples, that's going to continue until the Lord returns. I would love that. And of course, with that comes like, keep reaching the nations, keep reaching the nations.
You got it going on for sure. It's happening. And I think that's why we're still here.
Yeah.
And we like you. We do. But
likewise.
But really, it's what God is. I told her it's not about Rory, or it's like, what is God doing here, and why are we in Private, Oregon of all places?
Yeah.
And then God chose us to this place, this church, right down the street.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand a little bit now, God, why it's not just about my brother, which is tragic and beautiful at the same time, but yet we know that we got to work. You know what I mean? We can't just be filling up a pew or a seat.
Yeah.
And so you got it going on.
Oh, praise God.
I want to say thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Above everything. You're busy. And we just thank you for carving out and just being flexible.
Happy to be here. Lots of fun.
Yeah. I'm going to land the plane, but there is a video. I think did you find it? I think it's the Rory, it's like 50 seconds. We use that to close, honey. You just thumbs up, and I'll do my closing. I just want to thank everybody that's watching. This is the camera. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we're just blessed to be able to do conversation. I always tell people what we're doing here is, and I didn't come up with it, I'm just sharing something that was given to me, but we're just creating historical documents through conversation. And whether you're an amazing pastor, a family man, husband, cowboy, rancher, comedian, we're doing all this, and at the end of the day, it's all about giving God glory. And I hope that if someone's going through something, just shoot me a DM. We'll pray for you, but then we'll also pray with you. We want to pray with you, not just for you. So we're always having our doors are always open. And of course, if you're in a place that we can't help you, we've got a great team of people that are more than willing to walk you through whatever season or chapter. And if you want to connect with Pastor Rory, it's calvaryprimal.com. I'll put everything in the description. And I think are we good to go, honey? Okay. Well, thank you guys for your time. Thank you for your hearts. Those of you that tap on the screen, the like, shares, reposts. Thank you for everything you've done. But most important, thank you for your time above everything else. And we hope that take a breath, the exchange of your time for this was worth it. And so from the bottom of our hearts, we love you guys. God bless you guys. Ahui hope. Aloha and mahalo. Can I do the shaka? Love you guys. Aloha.